Ease up, guys. It's about having fun, okay?
Look, we get a messy altercation at the end of the game. You and I slip away undetected. You'll appreciate the plan tomorrow.
Welcome to WatchMojo.com, and today we're counting down our picks for the top 10 games that take themselves too seriously.
Well, that's what they had paid for, so in the end, that's what they got.
Before we begin, we publish new videos every day, so be sure to subscribe for more great content. For this list, we'll be looking at video games that took themselves and their stories far too seriously, whether it be through melodramatic narratives, pretentious themes, or overly moody and edgy characters.
Are you prepared to suffer to save your son?
Number 10, Call of Duty Ghosts.
The things you should forget.
Ghosts was a pretty promising entry in the then stagnating series, as Stephen Gahn, the screenwriter behind such acclaimed films as Syriana and Traffic, was penning the script. Unfortunately for gamers, the final product was a hokey Roger Moore-era Bond romp mixed with the grit of Call of Duty, and critics thought that the two were not very compatible.
We're ghosts, fighting for something that can't be killed.
The story opens up with the Federation, who are made up of South American countries, hijacking a superweapon space station and using kinetic bombardment to decimate cities. And it really only gets goofier from there, including a firefight in space and a tactical dog.
This is us, Sergeant.
Number 9, Assassin's Creed 3.
They speak of liberty and justice, but for who?
The Assassin's Creed series has always been a little too serious given its subject matter, what with its Templars, Apple of Edens, and of course the Animus. But this third installment ups the contrast between the serious and the outlandish to ridiculous levels.
Yeah. What happened?
While the setting of the American Revolution is a great concept, it's all played super duper straight, with a tone that could be described as too on the nose, and as a result you can't help but smirk at the seriousness of it. What should feel like an adventure story ends up being derailed by its own convolution. This is a great example of gameplay and tone simply not matching up.
We must focus first on defending our rights. When this is done, we'll have the luxury of addressing these other matters. You speak as though your condition is equal to that of the slaves.
Number 8, The Witness. While there's really no doubt that Jonathan Blow is a brilliant game designer, he also creates some really dramatic and self-important games. Case in point, 2008's Braid, and his follow-up, The Witness, which is a gorgeous game that has you complete line puzzles in a beautiful and lush environment. There isn't much of a story to be found in The Witness, or at least not on the surface. Instead, players are forced to rely on obscure audio logs, clues in the environment, and overly complex puzzles to figure out what the game means. Some theories suggest that the story is about emptiness. Others like to wax philosophical about the ways it explores the nature of humanity.
The physicist Wolfgang Pauli once spoke of two limiting conceptions,
Are you rolling your eyes yet?
been extraordinarily fruitful in the history of human thought, although no genuine reality corresponds to them.
Number 7, The Darkness.
From death comes death.
The Darkness follows the story of the emo-looking Jackie Estacado, a hitman who's been marked for death by a very cliched mobster by the name of Uncle Paulie Franchetti. While on the run, the darkness reveals itself within Jackie, granting him demonic powers and snake-like tentacle things, which he uses on his quest to kill Paulie.
Me and Paulie never did agree about the way things were being done.
It's a pretty standard mob revenge story, complete with drug shipments and corrupt police officers, with just, demonic snake tentacles thrown in for extra edginess. We understand the anti-establishment comic book anti-hero thing they were going for, but they simply didn't do enough to earn all of that darkness. No pun intended. Number 6, Watch Dogs.
I saw something no one was meant to see. They took someone very precious to me.
Watch Dogs was a highly anticipated game, as gamers couldn't wait for the fun of cruising through Chicago and hacking into machines with their phones. It's a shame that this brooding mess was what they got instead. Immediately, one of the biggest issues that stood out was the protagonist, Aiden Pierce, who was nothing but an overly moody, boring character with little to no development or nuance.
You gotta walk away from this, man.
Some things you can't walk away from.
The game's attempts at gravitas also felt considerably flat, as few characters are worth caring about, and the story follows the typical revenge drama beats and tropes. Ubisoft tried to remedy the melodramatic tone with a more tongue-in-cheek sequel, but it did little to right the ship of the series.
I don't look back anymore. I don't regret. I look forward.
Number 5, Max Payne 3.
Time moves forward, and nothing changes.
Yeah, the previous two Max Payne titles were also quite dark, but they were relatively simple and straightforward revenge tales, and the tone felt more earned. In this third installment, we find Max as a disheveled alcoholic in Sao Paulo working security. When his boss's wife is kidnapped, we're thrown into a spiraling and complex web, which ends in organ harvesting, I guess?
Figure I might as well die in the sunshine as die in the snow.
Honestly, the plot was trying so hard to be gritty that it ended up being complete nonsense, and Max's constant Shakespearean soliloquies only added to the game's overly serious tone. It's almost as if the game was trying so hard to be dark and edgy and moody that it threw common sense out the window.
Everybody's drunk and tanned and listening to house music. Most of them have plastic surgery and they're all doing blow. I guess it is kind of like Jersey, huh?
Number 4, Fez. Man, you'd think this thing would have been the be-all to end-all of gaming the way it was hyped up. After being nominated for 2 awards years before its release at the 2008 GDC Independent Games Festival, Fez was riding the hype train thanks to the swelling interest in indie games at the time. Developer Phil Fish was infamous during development for his outspoken and somewhat prickly personality, often clashing with co-developers, threatening to kill himself, and constantly attacking others on Twitter, which, as a side note, eventually led to the cancellation of Fez 2. The end product was a delight, but it was bogged down by the notorious, self-serious, and oppositional persona of its creator. Number 3, Homefront.
It's almost surreal.
The idea of a third world war, inspired by the strained relations with North Korea, is a frighteningly interesting one, especially due to the fact that the game addresses real-world events as catalysts for its final conflict. However, if you think Call of Duty is too dramatic, you haven't seen anything yet.
These things are smart, but they're not that smart.
The story is over the top, with a Greater Korean Republic launching a space weapon which sends a massive EMP over America. But aside from that campy element, the game is littered with terrifying scenes, like hiding in a mass grave. So, the disconnect between the bizarre James Bond-style plot devices and gritty war scenarios led to a tone that was inconsistent, but always gloomy. Number 2, Beyond Two Souls.
I know. They're coming.
Along with David Cage's other work, Heavy Rain, an equally grandiose and somewhat joyless crime story, Beyond Two Souls is an exercise in melodrama set to sci-fi conventions and tropes. Despite the rather absurd premise of a woman sharing a cosmic link with an otherworldly entity, this kind of feels like the Oscar bait of video games.
Go to your room. No!
We're constantly bombarded with scenarios that would be tearjerkers in other stories, but the disconnect we have with the characters and the somewhat pretentious plotting and time jumping only leads us to boredom. It's also constantly changing genres. Like the game wants to be a jack of all trades, but it just screams trying too hard.
We're alive.
Number 1, Shadow the Hedgehog. Honestly, what were Sega thinking with Shadow, aka Sonic the Edgehog? The game features typical Sonic gameplay, like running really fast and collecting rings, but it also features some ridiculous new mechanics, like shooting at enemies with automatic weapons.
Destroy those insolent fools.
While also showing cutscenes of Shadow riding around on a motorcycle, because that's badass or something like that. Many also claimed that the voice actors took their material far too seriously for its own good, but honestly, the material itself wasn't doing them any favors either. Oh, and the big bad guy looks like something out of a Spawn comic. Talk about losing touch with the tone of the franchise.
Just what was that all about?
Do you agree with our picks? Check out these other great clips from WatchMojo and subscribe for new videos every day.